Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to another one of my interviews here on William Wallace for America. With me today is State Representative Larry Frieman. Representative Freeman, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, William. I appreciate you inviting me and glad to be back on your show.
Well, I tell you, you're always one of the ones I see at the Capitol. And look, I can't say you're the only one, but I can say how hard I know that you are working for the people of your district and our state, and I appreciate that. So I want to get everybody on so we can talk about this next session that's coming up and the needs of Louisiana, which I know that you're on there. But before we get started, where's your district located exactly, so people can picture that?
Well, William, I represent three different parishes. Uh, it starts in St. Tammany, which is northern part of St. Tammany, and then I have the western part of Washington and the northeastern part of Tangipahoa parishes. So I cover three parishes in that part of the state.
That's a pretty broad area, I guess, but actually that's a growing area too.
Oh yeah, it's definitely very rural. I have a lot of farms and country out there, but the people are great. And the one municipality I have is Avita Springs, so that is the one city or municipality in my district.
What is your full time job when you're not being a representative? Even though we find that representatives are supposed to be a part time or a full time job with part time pay, or do I have that backwards? You got to do something else to make a living.
I do. I'm a practicing attorney. Been an attorney for the past 30 years. I represent businesses and insurance companies in the areas of workers' compensation, auto liability, and premises liability defense work.
Interesting. I'm glad you got that unique experience because that's something that right now with insurance problems in the state, it sounds like you might have a insight to some of that.
Well, of course, working in the industry for 30 years, I've seen, the ups and downs of the insurance industry and the ins and outs. So I do have a different perspective than a lot of people for that area.
So let's talk about some of your legislation from the last session to give people, an idea of some of the things that you're passionate about, whether it passed or not. Some of your legislation from the last session.
Well, two of the ones that I was very passionate about did not pass, and this would have been the second time I brought both of them. The first one was a Balance of Powers Act, as I called it. It was basically to balance the power between the executive branch and the legislative branch in times of emergency. And as we've seen with the COVID pandemic, the governor had very wide ranging, extremely powerful powers there to shut businesses down, shut churches down, do a lot of things that the legislators did not agree with all of it, but we had very little ability to stop it. So I brought a bill that would help to balance that power a little bit, give the legislature a seat at the table and a little bit more checks and balances, which is the way our Constitution is written. Unfortunately, that did not get it got to the governor at one point, or we were talking to the governor at one point, and we couldn't come to an agreement with what he would sign, and it died in the Senate. The second bill that I was very passionate about that I brought for the second time is the Second Amendment Protection Act. This bill would allow us as citizens of the state of Louisiana to protect ourselves from federal government overreach. And the bill basically said that if the executive branch, the president, or even Congress passes a law or an executive order which further infringes upon our rights under the Second Amendment, my bill said that no state, parish, or local law enforcement could enforce those laws against its own citizens. Now, the federal government can enforce its own laws, but the state, parish, and local law enforcement could not. That got all the way to the floor of the Senate this year, and the Senate president did not let it be heard in the waning moments of the session. So it died on the floor.
Now that amazes me because it wasn't he a Republican,
Yes.
and you would think that he'd be pro Second Amendment.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know much about any of the senators as far as their propensities. We did get it to the floor. It was there. It could have been heard, but they let the clock run out on my bill, and it never got heard.
So is that bill similar to what would make our state a sanctuary state?
Some people call it that. It's really not so much a sanctuary state. The proper term is the Second Amendment Protection Act, because we're protecting our citizens as per their Second Amendment rights from the federal government overreach. So, yeah, some people do call it a sanctuary city. I don't really, or a sanctuary state. I don't really call it that. I just call it the Protection Act.
You know what I like about this representative? It really strengthens our 10th Amendment right. And what a lot of people don't realize when they fight bills like this, they see it as a gun issue, whereas I see it as more of a states' right issue. And with the federal government constantly infringing on our rights more and more, what this does is it helps protect us on a local level. It helps, like I said, concrete our 10th Amendment rights from the federal government. And when people are against something like this, it's just like I like the example. I was speaking to Dodie Horton a minute ago, and she was talking about her legislation that says that in a school can't teach pronouns or the preferred pronouns. They
Mm-hmm.
can only teach education. And while I certainly understand the other side when they say, well, wait a minute, we have a right to make their choice, however they want to choose to live their lives. I understand that. But when you open Pandora's box and you don't have a wall, so to speak, protecting rights, it can be taught on either side. So, like I told Dodie, what happens in her case is the other side might not like one side, but if you allow it to happen on both sides, now you open up the door and nobody's going to like it. You like what your bill does. It concretes and says, hey, we're just validating our Second Amendment rights. Period. It's not about ideologies. It's about the 10th Amendment. Is that a good analogy?
Yeah, I think so, William.
I know I took it the wrong way. I took the long road home. I'm sorry.
No, you're actually good on that. It is a 10th Amendment issue. Um, we believe, and I believe at least, that states have to start exercising their 10th Amendment rights a little bit more. The federal government was supposed to be limited by the U.S. Constitution. And we see how the federal government has expanded its scope and its breadth of how it is, governing and creeping into our lives more and more. So the only real alternative is for states to then rise up and start exercising their 10th Amendment rights to kind of push back on the federal government and say, no, this is within our purview, not yours. And we need to have that fight.
Right.
And that's the only way it's ultimately going to be decided.
Like you said, it's about strengthening our 10th Amendment rights, which is kind of what Tennessee is doing right now on their banking system. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but Tennessee is making some strides to making their banking system a sovereign banking system from the federal government. And I don't know, I'm just finding out more and more about it, but it's something that they got legislation to do. Are you up on that?
Yes, I am. I actually had a conference call with the senator from Tennessee that is bringing this legislation. And he explained to us, exactly what he was doing. And a lot of it has to do with the central bank digital currency issue that's out there, CBDC. And that is a really big hot issue that most people don't know anything about. And as this central bank digital currency becomes more prevalent, it is a way for the federal government and others to basically monitor every single purchase you ever make, anything you ever do under that digital currency. So Tennessee is developing its own bank based upon hard currency, gold, silver, and so forth, to combat that digital currency phenomenon that's going on. So I think Texas has one. I think Tennessee is developing one. And Valerie Hodges and I, Representative Valerie Hodges and I, are kind of looking at that option. And hopefully we can come up with something down the road that we can start doing in Louisiana as well.
I love this. I didn't know that about you, Representative. I love you even more now.
Well, I'm like a jack of all trades. I know a little bit about a lot of things and a lot about nothing. So, we'll
Well,
see how that works.
the reason why I say it that emphatically is because I'm about freedom and liberty. And I really believe that in our country, freedom and liberty is under attack. And a lot of people argue that point. They'll say, well, our First Amendment is protected, our Second Amendment is protected, and we're all okay. But what they're not watching is how bureaucracy is growing, how the alphabet agencies are able to circumvent the Constitution because they make rules and regulations and policies and procedures within it that we, the people, have to abide by that never gets passed in Congress. So it's up to us, the people, and representatives like you that have freedom and liberty on their minds to be able to say, hey, look, we got to find ways to create these firewalls to be able to stop the power of federal government encroaching. And it's simple by using the 10th Amendment. And I really respect the fact that you're doing that. Thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. And I always tell people, most people believe that the First Amendment is the most important amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. I disagree. The Second Amendment is more important than the first, because with the Second Amendment, you could defend your right to get your First Amendment. So the Second Amendment's actually more important in my eyes, is if we preserve that, we always have the right to fight for the other rights that we have in this country.
I love it. Is there any, before we start on your legislation for this year, is there anything else on last year's legislation that you wanted to point out?
Not really. One of the things I was really disappointed in, I had brought one of the vaccine issue bills, trying to prevent some vaccines, or making it where they had to. I had a bill that said if a government or a quasi-governmental agency mandates a vaccine, any vaccine, that they had to give the people that they were mandating it to a sheet with their rights on it, what rights they have. And I'll give you an example. Most people don't know that even though a school mandates a vaccine, that a parent can opt out of that particular vaccine. My son is a student at Southeastern, and when they started talking about you need a vaccine at the school level, I made sure he understood that all he had to do was say, I refuse. You don't even have to give a reason. School age kids do not have to even give a reason. All you have to do is just opt out, and you don't have to take it. Well, most people don't know that. So I was saying that if you're going to mandate something, especially a new vaccine at the schools or governmental agencies, you have to tell those folks what rights they have to opt out if there are any.
I love this. Again, another step in the direction of freedom and protecting our freedoms. And
well, that didn't even get out of committee, so
yeah,
that didn't go very far.
There's some people in that committee that aren't as keen on freedom, or can see it, because that's my point. Where freedom and liberty is under attack, it often goes unnoticed because we take our freedom and liberty for granted, but two, we tend to think that our only freedom and liberty is our First and Second Amendment. So what legislation do you have coming up for this next session?
Well, William, I'm actually going to delve into an area that I haven't before, so I feel a little apprehensive because it's not it's not within my wheelhouse. But in light of Roe v. Wade being overturned, which we were all really happy that was the case, the Family Forum and Right to Life talk about trying to help pregnant women. One of the things they want to do now is focus on pregnant moms and give them the help they need. Well, I found out through some colleagues of mine in my area who practice family law that a pregnant woman did not have any rights under our law to recover any of her out-of-pocket medical expenses from the father of the child. And when I heard that, I just didn't think that was fair. So I have filed a bill that says that when a pregnant woman proves paternity, the father, by paternity testing and by clear and convincing evidence, then they can that woman can recover 50% of her out-of-pocket medical expenses from the father. So I think it's something that's really fair and equitable, and allows a pregnant woman, if she so chooses, to then recover some of her medical expenses. That's one of the bills I'm bringing, and I think the Right to Life and Family Forum and others. I've gotten very, very good feedback on this bill, and I should get a lot of support.
I love that idea. That's again empowering women, protecting women, and also at the same time promoting life. It might not seem a direct way to promote life, but it does promote life and it does promote women's rights. And so I like that. You're empowering women.
Yeah, and so the second bill I'm bringing is also kind of delving into that family law area. It was brought to my attention that when the Department of Children and Family Services, DCFS, goes in and removes a child from the home, basically, it's called the Child in Need of Care Act. When they remove a child from the home, there's this series of court processes that you have to go through before they decide where the child's going to be placed. Under our current system, an interested family member, say a grandmother, an aunt, or uncle, or what have you, they cannot intervene into the process until it's well down the road. This bill will allow an interested family member to intervene early in the process, to give the court, the judge, the fact finder, the option, should they qualify, to place the child with an interested family member rather than in a stranger foster home. So I think this is a really good bill to give the courts more options early in the process rather than later in the process.
I love this. Once again, you're protecting children and women.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And again, this was brought by some colleagues in my area that practice in this area, and they were bringing their concerns to me. And again, I thought this is something that would be important. So yes, I am kind of treading into unfriendly waters, which I've never been in before because I don't practice in that area. I'm not very familiar with the area, but I've been promised by my colleagues in my area that they're going to come up and testify and sit with me at the table and answer the questions that need to be answered.
Well, and again, sometimes it just takes one courage. You're delving into an area that you're not familiar with, but yet your gut feeling is telling you, kind of telling you it's the right thing to do, and you're using your courage to be able to bring it forth. Because again, if it's not an area you're familiar with, it's the right thing, and you've got some people that you trust that's giving you good information, then I think it only helps. Like I said, once again, women and children.
Well, yeah, and again, the two bills that I just spoke about, they're just fair. It's just fairness. It's just a fundamental fairness thing to me is to make the playing field level and make it fair for everybody. And I think these two bills achieve that goal.
So, any other? Now, I know this is a fiscal session. So, do you have any other non-fiscal bills coming up?
Well, let me just talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
We have the governor who's been touting a $900 million excess in this year. So we have $900 million left over from this fiscal year. And, obviously that's a great thing. That's wonderful. However, what he's not telling you, what the governor is not telling you, or the people, is that next year there's a projected $800 million deficit. The year after that, a $300 million deficit, and the year after that, an $800 million deficit. So while we have all this money this year left over, we're going to be in a deficit situation next year, the year after, and the year after that. So I believe it is incumbent upon us as a legislature to be fiscally responsible with this excess. Mm-hmm. And I do not believe we should be spending all this excess on anything while we know we have a deficit next year. So I'm hoping we can craft something. What's that?
You put it to a savings account for next year.
That is being looked at, and we're working on that. But yes, that is part of my plan, and I am working with some other members and really closely with Representative Brett Guyman out of Lake Charles, Representative Philip Tarver out of Lake Charles, who both are working closely with me and others in our group to find very fiscally responsible measures that we're going to bring in this session to make sure that we keep our feet fiscally, our finances fiscally sound. Because, William, we're expecting to get a new Republican governor. But no matter who the governor is, it doesn't matter, Republican or Democrat. We as a legislature should not, and it's our responsibility, should not leave a fiscal mess for the next governor to clean up. And again, we're hoping it's a Republican governor, that we can move the state forward. So we don't want him bogged down trying to fix a fiscal mess when we can work on more important things going forward.
I love the foresight or the forethought in this, because it sounds like simple basic math. If we have a $900,000, or was it $900,000?
900 million.
900 million overage this year, 800 million short next year, and then whatever it is the following year, I think it's another 900 million set. It's just take the money from this year, pay it for next year, and take the other 100 million, pay it for the following year, and now you got 2 years to figure it out.
Hey, it's so commonsensical that it seems silly, but every time I talk to people about this, they say, well, yeah, that makes common sense. That makes sense. Why wouldn't we do it? Well, the reason we don't do it is because we have a lot of spending people who love to spend every dollar that we ever take in Baton Rouge. I mean, they want to build this, they want to build that, it's all nice to do infrastructure. I get it. And I want to do infrastructure projects as well. But when we're looking at a deficit and we have an excess, the right thing to do is to make sure we cover that deficit next year before we think about spending things. And by the way, the governor has said he wants to give teacher pay raises. He wants to give more higher ed. He wants to give a number of recurring expenses. He wants to use this excess to create more recurring expenses. Well, when you do that, the word recurring means you got to pay for it again next year.
It never, and that's the problem with DC too. Is DC is a spending issue. We got this money coming in, so we can spend it now, and then the unfunded liabilities add up, and nobody talks how Louisiana itself has unfunded liabilities. So if you're doing recurring expenses, unfunded liabilities, it only compounds to where we're going to have the national debt in Louisiana if we don't start spending money responsibly.
Well, that's right. And, again, when you have a recurring expense, that means it's going to come back and you got to pay for it next year. And then if you add these recurring expenses to the ongoing budget that we have for next year, it'll raise the deficit even higher. So it is not fiscally responsible to spend all of this excess on recurring expenses, nor is it really fiscally responsible to spend it on anything other than making sure that we cover the shortfalls in the next 2 to 3 years.
So if the legislature has the power of the purse, can't they create a law that basically says, as simple as this, the excess for this year gets used for the deficit for next year? That's it. And then you put it on his desk and let him veto it. I mean, obviously he is.
Yeah, well, we're working on that, William. I'll let you know.
I don't want to tell all the secrets. I'm sorry. we're not here to tell secrets. So you've got 2 non-fiscal bills, and you've got sounds like you might have some fiscal bills that you haven't dropped yet, or you're not able to talk about just yet. You're probably working on. Is that correct?
That is correct. Now, going back to the non-fiscal bills, last year I did a bill for the physical therapist, which allowed physical therapists to, when they do telehealth visits, to be reimbursed for their time and the charges. So that passed and was signed into law by the governor. This year, the occupational therapists have asked me to run a similar bill. So when they do telehealth visits with their patients, they will get reimbursed. So that's yet another bill. And I'm also working on a hospital transparency bill, hospital pricing transparency bill. There's a federal law that's in place right now that requires hospitals to be transparent in their pricing. And I've learned that there are a lot of hospitals out there that are not complying with the federal law. So states are now implementing their own hospital transparency law, which basically mimics the federal law. And that's something I'm working on right now too. That's still in the works. I'm looking at it and getting it drafted. And Raymond Cruz, Representative Raymond Cruz, and I are kind of working on this one together.
Didn't Senator Talbot do something like that a year or 2 years ago? Something similar to that?
He could have. I don't know. I don't recall. But it's something that I've learned this past summer that's being done around the country, and it's really important to consumers. We want to know when you go to the hospital, you should be able to know how much it's going to cost for
Right.
something that you're going to get. This is the only area of consumerism that you go get something and then be told how much it costs after you buy it. I mean, you don't go to a car lot and say, I want a car, and you say, okay, I'm gonna buy it, and then tell me how much it costs after you're already hooked. You ask the price before, right? So you can shop and make good decisions. And that's what this bill is supposed to help.
And once again, this is a wake up call for freedom in this. When you said there's a federal law on for this already, but a lot of hospitals are getting away with with it not being enforced on a federal level. Here, you're coming in on a state level, say, look, okay, we're going to use our state's rights,
right,
and we're going to be able to protect people's freedoms. Because basically, when someone goes to the hospital and they get slammed with a bill where they don't know what the cost is, especially if it's a non-emergency, their freedoms are being encroached on, and they get hit with a huge bill. Now it requires them to have to make payments, or however they can't pay the bill. Maybe it goes to collections. Now their credit score is again, it all connects back to freedom. And again, it's another way to protect it.
That's right, and that's really what this is all about, is trying to make sure that consumers are protected. They can make good decisions. They can decide and get their treatment where they want to get their treatment based upon decisions that they want to make and the criteria they want to use.
While this is probably part of a bigger conversation, we can narrow it down succinctly. Louisiana, as we've been talking about, is facing a lot of problems, a lot of shortfalls up ahead after this year of a surplus. But there's other financial issues that are coming up. We have an outward migration. We don't have as many businesses coming in. We got a tax structure problem. Louisiana is facing a lot of problems. What do you think are the major problems that Louisiana is faced with, and what's your idea for some solutions for those?
Well, first and foremost, the biggest problem we have right now is going to be this budgetary issue. Okay, so we have already talked about that one. We'll move to another one.
Yeah, I love it.
The big issue, of course, is insurance rates. Everybody's getting hammered on their property insurance, their car insurance, the trucking industry. Insurance rates is a major problem. My daughter, who graduated from Southern Mississippi, stayed in Hattiesburg to work. Well, her car was registered and insured in Louisiana. I transferred the car to her name. She registered it in Mississippi, and her car insurance went down by 50%. It got cut in half.
Wow.
Just by moving from one state to the other.
Right.
So I know that's the case because I've lived it, I've seen it, I've heard about it, but now I've actually seen it in practice. Half the price for the same exact coverage in Mississippi versus Louisiana. So there's no excuse for that, William. I mean, we're next door neighbors. Why do we have so much? Why do we pay so much versus Mississippi? It's not acceptable. We have to do something about that. The housing market, the housing insurance market is out of control. Look, I'll admit, I did not vote to give $45 million giveaway to the commissioner. I did not vote for that. I didn't think it was going to work. And it's proven in the past it hasn't worked. Mm-hmm. But my colleagues thought it was important for them to do. They did it. But here's something I just learned. National General Insurance is a subsidiary of Allstate Insurance. They filed for their rates back, I think, in August or October of 2022. They still haven't been approved by the commissioner. Now, the commissioner came to the legislature and said, we need to bring more companies in to write. This company wants to write. They won't approve their rates. Now, it's my understanding that he thinks they're making too much money. The rates are too high. Well, you know what? They're still lower than Citizens.
Right.
So let them come in, let them write. And as competition starts, more competition, the
Right.
rates are going to drive themselves down. But you're going to stop a company that wants to write, is asking to write, and you won't approve their rates.
And you just made an excellent point, Representative, when you said competition. Because if Louisiana creates an environment where we bring in more insurance companies that are able to compete, not only do the rates come down, but the benefits of the insurance company is when there's more insurance companies writing more policies, when a hurricane comes, one or two or three insurance companies aren't the only ones getting hit with all the claims. The damage, so to speak, is spread out amongst more insurance companies, so that not one is or two or three is taking that big financial hit. So competition is key. But I find it interesting that that insurance company, Jim Donovan, is holding off, or they're holding off from coming in. I wonder if they're going to come in now magically after these grants are available.
Well, it's my understanding they're about to just pull out and say, forget it. We're not going to write here any longer
Okay.
if they can't get their rates approved. So I also heard about a company that had submitted something last year and never got their rates approved, and they pulled out. So, I'm getting some mixed signals here from the commissioner's office when you say you want people to come in and companies to come in, but when they come and ask for their rates, you're not approving their rates. And you have, okay, well, I'm going to protect consumers. Well, protecting consumers by not allowing them to write is just as bad as protecting consumers from high rates. I mean, you don't let them write, the rates are going to stay high anyway.
Right, exactly. It's amazing how common sense a lot of this stuff that we've been talking about tonight in government and legislation, how much common sense it is, but it's also amazing how much it doesn't follow the path of common sense.
Well, no, that's true. And look, I'm hoping at least there's going to be a package of bills by different folks that are going to address some of these issues. The independent insurance agents had some very, very good suggestions on how to, bring some legislation that may help us. Now, the problem is that the legislation is going to appear on its surface to be pro-insurance, but you have to be somewhat pro-insurance to get the insurance companies back in. So we have to deregulate some of this. We have to relinquish some of these regulations.
Right.
Uh-oh.
No, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can hear you, but my camera looks like it froze up.
Yeah, it'll probably catch up in a minute, but as long as we can hear you, that's good. Yeah, it's interesting because once again, it's about competition, free markets, and the right policies to allow these companies to come in and compete. But I'm glad we got good people like you on there on it. So I'm one that believes that freedom in America. And by the way, were you done talking about that?
Oh yeah, no, that's exactly what I think is going to happen. We got to, like I said, we got to deregulate it a little bit. Let loose the reins, allow the free market principles to take over, and then have these companies operate. They have to make a profit. There's no question they have to make a profit, or they're not going to write here. So we need to kind of allow those free market forces to work, and hopefully it'll turn things around.
Love it. Well, I'm gonna expand a little bit and talk a little bit about freedom a little bit more, because a lot of things that we've talked about, a lot of things that you've mentioned go back to freedom. I believe that freedom is under attack in America. And while we're focusing on Louisiana on this interview, I think that a lot of the freedoms that we have in our country are also under attack in Louisiana, especially bureaucracies and legislation that doesn't help expand markets. It doesn't help produce growth. It doesn't help drive a better economic condition for people. So I really think that's under attack in Louisiana also. Where do you think our freedoms are most under attack, either on a national level, on a state level, or how they're connected And what's the best way to solve those problems?
Well, one of the main things, and this is just an easy one. This is kind of a basic one. When we talk about licensing, you know, um, florists and hair braiders and you name it in Louisiana, you have to have a license. Well, a license only really benefits the ones who have it. It is a deterrent for others to get into the market and to work. So, one of my really good close colleagues, Julie Emerson, has been fighting this battle for years, trying to take away some of the licensing requirements for certain jobs where people can, freely move into those jobs and operate and allow them to open businesses and so forth. So I think that's just a real basic one in Louisiana that we should be looking at is to uh, help to reduce the number of licenses that are out there. Certain jobs, I can't imagine why they're needing a license. So that's just one basic way to try to improve our freedoms and the freedoms of folks that want to get into the workforce, maybe open a business and be productive.
Well, when you've got so many rules and regulations and government policies and standards, and like you said, all this licensing requirements, you inhibit a lot of people that would are able to start a business, that would start a business. And when that one person starts a business, eventually they might have to hire somebody. They're going to have to buy supplies. That now you got money flowing to the economy. A lot of people just talk about jobs, but it's about it's about money flow. And when money's flowing freely through our economic system, you not only expand not only jobs, but you also expand opportunity for everybody because that hair braiding business might create a demand at the local not hair salon but beauty store. So, like you said, there's a lot of these businesses that people could start, overnight and be able to have again in an economy where you don't have a lot of opportunity like ours in Louisiana. That individual who's able to start their own business without having to go through the licensing creates opportunity for themselves, opportunity for others, and a financial, more of a freely flowing economic system.
Yeah, I agree.
So where else are your freedoms under attack in America?
Well, I think in the education system, William, one of the things that really bothers me is the inability of parents to move children to the schools of their choice. I am a big pro-choice, school choice advocate because I think every parent should choose the best school that fits their child. And in Arizona, they just recently passed the money follows the child, where the money that is allocated to a child is not to fund the school system, but to fund the child. So I think that's a great step in the right direction for Arizona. I'd love to see Louisiana start taking those steps where, especially folks in the inner city, in the poor areas, where the school systems, there's failing schools. No child should be forced to stay in a failing school.
Right, exactly.
And if you start allowing people to move and take their money with them, those schools will either have to raise their standards and clean up their act, or they're going to go out and someone will come in and replace them. So it's all about, again, the free market, but that is a really big issue of freedom, in my opinion. Freedom of education, freedom to choose the right schools, freedom to move your child and have that money follow the student.
I love it. Goes back to free markets, goes back to competition, goes back to, like I said, freedom. And how wonderful to think that we could start a movement, if you will, where people are more in control of their tax dollars. And if we started with education, where parents can decide where their children go and where their tax dollars go, of course, to follow that child. Imagine, if you will, other parts of our government that is our tax dollars are funding. If we are able to choose, where our money goes, it takes some power out of the hands of the politicians that are not spending it correctly. As we've discussed, we have some of those here in Louisiana, more on a national level. And when we allow that to happen, power goes back into the hands of the people instead of bigger government.
That's correct. Yes.
You know, I think this is a great movement. How great of a movement this could be to start in Louisiana. I know other states are doing it, but if Louisiana really works on that right now, we might be able to be seen as the leaders in this freedom movement.
Well, last year, Representative Rhonda Butler had a bill that passed. She had an education savings account for kids with disabilities. It was very limited to just kids with disabilities, that you could have this ESA, education savings account, and use it and take it to different schools and so forth. And it passed out of both houses, and the governor vetoed it.
Mhm.
So clearly, I mean, vetoing disabled children, I mean,
Right.
come on. That's insane.
Exactly right. That's when you really see the true colors. And as much as I want to always talk about finding ways to unite, putting ideologies aside, and trying to give everybody a chance, it's actions like that that make you realize that they're not working for the common good. They're not working for everyday people. They're working more for a narrative or ideology, or of their own that doesn't fit with somebody else's.
Well, of course, that was probably payback to the teachers union for sure.
I'm really excited about. We got to wrap it up here in a few minutes. I'm really excited about your Second Amendment bill, and I want to touch on that one more second in case people just tuned in. Again, what will that bill do? It will make Louisiana a
Well, what it does, it protects Louisianians against the federal overreach. What'll happen is if let's say President Biden issues an executive order banning magazines, or issuing a tax or something, or a fee on guns that just tries to inhibit the free flow of our Second Amendment rights. My bill says that no state, parish, or local law enforcement agency can enforce that federal law or edict against the citizens of Louisiana. So if the federal government wants to enforce it, they have to send in the marshals, the FBI, whoever they want to enforce their own laws. But we're not going to enforce those unconstitutional laws against our citizens in Louisiana.
back to that 10th Amendment right.
Yes.
Representative Frieman, I love it. I absolutely love it. Do you have anything else that you want to add? Anything to keep an eye on for the next session, or anything you'd like to mention here before we wrap up?
Well, look, I think we're at a crossroads, William. We're one of 3 states that have lost population over the last number of years. One of 3 states. Florida and Texas are growing in double digits, and we're losing population. We are at a crossroads. This election cycle from the governor on down is critical. We cannot afford another 8 years of we just had to get further and further behind the rest of our neighbors. So we have to elect the right governor. We have to elect the best legislators possible to move this state forward. And conservative principles always move the state forward. Conservative principles benefit everyone. Everyone, from the top to the bottom and all in between. Conservative principles help everybody. And it's important, in my opinion, that we elect a governor with conservative principles and legislators with conservative principles, so we can all get on the same page, move this state in the right direction, fix our economy, fix our education, fix our infrastructure, and reduce the crime in our state. And by the way, 3 of the top 10 cities in crime statistics are in Louisiana: New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Shreveport. So that is not something to be proud of as a state.
And that's also very much connected to economics and outward migration of people. Because when you have less opportunity, bad economics, outward migration of people, it only creates a great breeding ground for crime. And
Absolutely. And that criminal justice reform act that was passed in 2017 is a failure. It's an abysmal failure. It is our duty. And we started doing this last year. We passed 5 good, strong criminal bills last year to start reversing some of that criminal justice reform that was done in 2017. And the governor vetoed all 5 bills. Debbie Villio out of Jefferson Parish. Representative Villio is the leader on this in this issue, and I wholly support everything she does in this. And she is a stalwart in trying to reverse some of this stuff and start to stem the flow of this crime problem we're having in our state.
Well, I'll give a lot more attention to her too. I did that for one of her last constitutional amendments that got passed last time around, and hopefully she gets another good one under her belt. Love it. Well, Representative Frieman, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. Always a pleasure to come on your show. And anytime you need me, give me a holler.
I will be doing that. I'm in the broadcast. I'll talk to you here in just a second. Everybody else, please share that on the interview. You'll see it posted on Rumble. You'll see it posted on YouTube. You'll also hear it as a podcast the next few days. I take the audio off and make a podcast out of it, and we'll share it. That way you can share it. Let's do it again. And please, thank you for tuning in and like our pages, especially Representative Freeman's. Have a great day.